we don't really get these opportunities to meet with each other and to sit down with each other very often. So we strongly want to take this opportunity to discuss the types of research that has been happening and the types of campaigning around the academic boycott. So to start with, I just want to introduce the panel as we're sitting. It's not necessarily the order we will speak. My name is Rafeef Ziadah, and I'm a member of the steering committee of the Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott Initiative. Right to the furthest end is Tasneem from the South African Students' Congress, Jonathan from BRICUP, the British Committee for Universities of Palestine. Mary Jo is from Faculty for Palestine in Canada. Yafa works with Students Against Israeli Apartheid in Canada as well. And last but not least is Rabab Abdulhadi, one of the leading Palestinian academics, as well as a member of the US Campaign for the Academic and Cultural Boycott. So I will begin by giving a very, very brief history of the academic boycott campaign. When it was launched in Palestine, the types of things we are asking people to take, and where the initiative came from historically. And then everyone on the panel will speak about their own experiences and the various campaigns they have been through. To start with, why would we be calling for a boycott of the Israeli Academy? Most people say, shouldn't you be boycotting something else? Isn't the academy something sacred that shouldn't be touched? And we start from the premise that the academy is part of the society and part of the culture in which it's operating. It's not separated in an ivory tower, but it is part and parcel of everything that happens in society. And when you have a country like Israel oppressing the Palestinian people, practicing the worst forms of colonialism, apartheid, and occupation against the Palestinian people, then the academy plays a central role in propping up that system, in supporting that system, in giving services to that system, and in educating the cadre of that system. As Desmond Tutu said, it can never be business as usual. Israeli universities are an intimate part of the Israeli regime by active choice. While Palestinians are not able to access universities and schools, Israeli universities produce the research, technology, arguments, and leaders for maintaining the occupation. And Ben Gurion University, and here he was speaking about the fantastic campaign led by South African students for an academic boycott of Ben Gurion University, and he said it is no exception. By maintaining links to both the Israeli Defense Forces and the arms industry, Ben Gurion University structurally supports and facilitates the Israeli occupation. So the starting premise of what we are saying is that these Israeli institutions are part and parcel of Israel's system of occupation, colonialism, and apartheid. Now it's important to begin by situating where this comes from in Palestinian history. Because part of Israel's campaign against the Palestinian people has been the destruction of Palestinian Academy. Most people here would be familiar that Palestinian universities were actually shut down during the First Intifada, and Palestinians had to be teaching underground to maintain the system. To this day, if a Palestinian student wants to just get to their university, they have to cross checkpoints, military checkpoints. If you look at the presidents or the members of most student councils across Palestine, they are jailed for what they do, and they are jailed for their activities. So, when people say that the academy is above politics, the first thing we tell them is, go to Palestine and look at how Israel treats Palestinian universities. Look at how Israel treats Palestinian professors and Palestinian students. They are not separated from the political reality. It is part and parcel of the Palestinian reality. So part of the academic boycott is to situate the Palestinian and say that Palestinians have been living under the brutality of the Israeli regime, and especially Palestinian universities have suffered tremendously. And the strength of the Palestinian people has been able to maintain our educational system under the occupation. On the other hand, Israel's own academy is highly militarized. And here it's important to note that Israel as a state is one of the most militarized states in the world. We are talking about a state that exports 80% of its military things that they produce. 41% of the drones around the world are exported by Israel. Now, where does the research for these drones happen? Where does the development of this technology actually happen? It largely happens in Israeli universities, in conjunction with the private sector, as most of you would know, because of the way neoliberalism works. Now most universities are privatized. So there are contracts between the private sector, highly militarized in Israel, and these universities. The doctors that treat Palestinian political prisoners by giving them just a Panadol and taking them back to the torturers, these are graduates of the Israeli Academy. The architects that design the apartheid wall, that design everything that needs to go with the apartheid wall and the segregation system, these are graduates and are trained in the Israeli Academy. So we cannot be separating the Israeli Academy from this reality. Israeli Academy gives high privileges to soldiers who serve in the military, including scholarships. So it is part and parcel of Israel's militarism and Israel's campaign against the Palestinian people. And here, of course, it's important to mention that Palestinian citizens of Israel are treated in a discriminatory manner under Israeli universities. Because oftentimes, supporters of Zionism will say, but look, Palestinians can go to universities here. But they are highly discriminated against within the Israeli system. And there has been a lot of writing about the treatment of Palestinian citizens of Israel in the Israeli Academy and how it actually functions. So, due to all of this, there was initiatives within the Palestinian territories for calling for an academic boycott of these institutions. Now, we have to situate this academic boycott, even though it came earlier than the call for boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, but it is within that same framework and that same logic. And the Palestinian campaign for the boycott, divestments, and sanctions basically calls for three basic demands. One is ending the occupation and dismantling the apartheid wall. Two is rights, equality for Palestinian citizens of Israel. And three, and often the most contentious, the right of return for Palestinian refugees. So those are the three basic demands within the Palestinian boycott, divestment, and sanctions call. The specific campaign for the academic and cultural boycott actually has a set of guidelines that were developed by Palestinian institutions in consultation with each other in all the places of the Palestinian diaspora. And the guidelines for the academic boycott can easily be found on the PACBI website. The Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott Initiative has the specific guidelines. But I just want to go through very quickly what things that the Palestinian campaign asks people not to do, what it asks academics and students and people of conscience not to do. We ask you not to refrain from participation in any form of academic and cultural cooperation, collaboration, or joint projects with Israeli institutions. We ask on people to advocate a comprehensive boycott of Israeli institutions at the national and international levels, including suspension of all forms of funding and subsidies to these institutions. We ask people to promote divestment and disinvestment from Israel by international academic institutions, and to work towards the condemnation of Israeli policies by pressing for resolutions to be adopted by academic, professional, and cultural associations and organizations. And finally, to support Palestinian academic and cultural institutions directly without requiring them to partner with Israeli counterparts. And this is very important in the academy because oftentimes they will say, if a Palestinian researcher wants to work on a project, the way they will receive funding is to also work with an Israeli researcher. It's this idea that there is balance between the two sides. And what we say is there is no balance. This is a situation of oppressor versus oppressed, and we will not be collaborating with Israeli institutions. Now, oftentimes this is confusing for people. They don't understand why we would say this. But in the Palestinian context, what does it mean to actually be collaborating on a research project based in Europe or based in Brazil when we can't actually cross the checkpoints or the wall to go to see our own lands? It's actually a pathetic thing to be asking from us Palestinians. So one of the basic demands is that we are very capable of doing our research on our own. We have very capable academics that do not need an Israeli counterpart. Those are the basic demands of the boycott campaign, of the academic boycott campaign. But of course it is framed within this idea of the complicity of the Israeli academy. And Israeli academics will often speak about the great things that their academy is producing and will argue about academic freedom. And I will just end on this note. Until there is full freedom for the Palestinian people, until we can return to our homes and live there in justice and in peace, then let's start talking about academic freedom in our area. Thank you. I will pass it on to Jonathan from BRICUP.
Thank you. Is this, okay, good. Just before I start properly, to stress the fact that the boycott, as asked for by PACBI, is an institutional boycott. It's not a boycott of individuals. If you wish to, as an academic in Britain or anywhere else, you can work with an Israeli counterpart, whether that Israeli be Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or whatever, and you will not be breaking the rules, the guidelines. What you should not do is enter into any relationship whatsoever with the institution that person probably works in Israel. And that distinction is widely misunderstood, certainly in Britain. And always, when people are attacking the academic boycott, they do it on the basis of, you don't want to work with Jewish academics, and they see it as a form of anti-Semitism. I think the people who say this generally know that it's an institutional boycott, but choose to present it as an individual boycott because that will be more, get more traction. However, let's go on. PACBI made its call in 2004, and BRICUP was the first organization in outside Palestine to pick it up. Indeed, we started 2 years previously with a call before BRICUP existed. The people who launched BRICUP had a call for a moratorium on European funding, which was an idea that was around. Then PACBI made its call and BRICUP was set up very quickly. And for the next 5 years, we were the only organization of that kind anywhere in the world outside Palestine. Now, thanks to the hard work put in by the Israelis, particularly around 2009, 2010, we have organizations in Canada, United States, India, France, sometimes we have one in Australia, and there are other countries as well which have organizations in different stages of formation. But the Israelis are the best promoter of the academic boycott with the outrages that they perpetrate on Gaza, on Mavi Marmara, etc. In the early days of our organization, we concentrated particularly on the academic trade union, thinking that that was a sensible forum in which to get support. And the battle was very hard fought in successive annual congresses of the trade union. A new trade union was formed about the same time as BRICUP was formed. And at the very first Congress, we went into that with people who were members of who were delegates to the conference, expecting to be defeated, but were determined to make a good fight. And slightly to our surprise, we had a narrow victory for a resolution saying that people should consider their consciences and whether they should participate with Israeli institutions in academic matters. In successive years, that fight has got easier and easier, and we get overwhelming majorities now in Congress, which is the educational effect of the continuous debates we've had within the union. Now the Zionists don't even bother to come and make speeches. Instead, they have resorted to the courts of law. They are trying a legal strategy of various kinds, which has frightened the union bureaucrats. And now they have now attacked the union, claiming that it is institutionally anti-Semitic because it continues to pass these resolutions democratically. And that case was heard over a 3-week period ending last week in London, and we're waiting to hear what the outcome will be. That will not be till the new year. But as part of that case, we at BRICUP went around collecting signatures of Jewish academics who would say that they did not find any anti-Semitism within institution. And we collected this independent of the union, we presented it to the court. They were clearly very pleased to have it. The lawyer speaking for the trade union used it in his final speech, etc. BRICUP, however, is not a Jewish organization, though it does have people like myself who are Jewish within it. We think we've been quite effective. Judged by the level of Israeli hysteria, I would say we've been very successful. Before BDS was quite so strong as it is now, the academic boycott was the cutting edge, and the Israeli government became quite hysterical about the effect. So we think we were doing a good job. At one stage, some of you may have heard of Alan Dershowitz, who is
of course.
a terrible American Jewish lawyer at Harvard, and he signed up to become an honorary member of an Israeli university, so that he could threaten to sue every single member of our organization on grounds that they were discriminating against him. He never took up. That was one legal challenge which was never made. But this is an indication of the level of international effect which this campaign had. How effective we are, it's hard to know, because many of the decisions are taken quietly by academics who don't publicize that they are no longer dealing with Israeli academic institutions. We call this the silent boycott. It's most effective when people, I don't know how many people know it, the European Union puts up lots of money for scientific and other research, and you must gain partner organizations from a number, 6 or 7 different European countries. And Israel is eligible to be one of those countries, of course. And we don't know how many people are now choosing not to have Israeli partners because they themselves don't want to, or because they know that there will be a fuss. So that's hard to quantify, but we do know that from things in the Israeli press, in Haaretz, etc., that the Israeli universities are finding it harder to get partners abroad. So there is clearly an effect going on. When fighting these European partnerships, we find it very useful to have something called PACBI, which is the European platform for academic and cultural boycott, which is formed of all the European organizations which focus on boycott. And we have ourselves, BRICUP, we have AUDIP, which is the French organization, we have colleagues in Italy, in Spain, or perhaps it's in Catalonia. I'm not quite sure which it is at the moment. But I think it's more based in Catalonia than in Spain. We have a Swedish organization, we have a Norwegian organization. So it's spreading across Europe. This is a potential for the future. At the moment we mostly use it for signing joint letters going to the European Union, but it must have more potential than that. How we organize, I think we've had a significant effect. We are a very small number of people. We've deliberately decided not to be a membership organization. Nobody can join BRICUP unless we invite them. That is to say, there is a group of people who form the committee. The committee meets every month. There's about 20 of us. And when we want somebody else, we hear of somebody else who might be useful, we say, would they like to join us? If they say yes, they come in and sit on the meeting. We think about whether they're suitable, and then they join us. We have, however, 500 or so supporters on the list who receive our monthly newsletter and occasionally donate funds, because we have no money. We have no offices, no secretariat, no money, but we function. Apart from the bulletin, our main organizing tool is this pamphlet, which is Why Boycott Israeli Universities. It's been available for about 5 years now. Surprisingly, it doesn't seem to date. You could put in some more recent information, but it's still highly relevant. You can find this on the BRICUP website to download, or if you write to us, we can get you a physical copy. Within BRICUP, we have a medical campaign which focuses on trying to get the Israeli Medical Association thrown out of the World Medical Association, and we have an architects campaign concerned with the terrible things which Israeli architects are doing to do with the war and many other things. So we have something now called the British Writers in Support of Palestine. There's a British Artists for Palestine is in the process of formation. So we are a multidisciplinary group, a cluster of organizations who find BRICUP to be useful for their continuation and growth. The modes of boycott which we function with include individual boycott acts, which I already talked about. If the Israelis come to us, the Israeli institutions come to us, then we have wonderful opportunities. The Zionist Federation of Great Britain organized an event at the Science Museum, a very big institution in London, and we organized signatures against that in a picket of the whole enormous building. We got a lot of publicity. In fact, we were on the front page of a national newspaper called The Independent. That is an understatement. We were the entire front page of The Independent. And that sort of opportunity to use the boycott to educate the population that in Israel the occupation permeates the whole of society, including its universities. Another example is when Ahava, which many of you will know, is they process Palestinian mud into cosmetics. They also have very good laboratories, and they are a partner in various European Union funded research projects. One of them has as a partner the British Natural History Museum, another of our great national institutions. And we were able to organize a letter signed by numerous scientists and people who are not scientists, but we went for the top level signatures. We had 3 fellows of the Royal Society, but we also had 3 equivalent, very top level non-academics in the cultural field. So, and that again got a major display and lots of discussion in the national newspapers. We work jointly with students where we can. The Ahava case, one of the academic bodies was also in England, King's College London, and we joined with the students to help them to generate the campaigning material and to speak to, we wrote letters to the head of the college, etc., in support of their campaign on the ground, which was very useful. And it appears that King's College has decided not to have any involvement in future, with at least with Israeli institutions which are based in the occupied territories. We are branching out into culture because there's a fine line between certain kinds of culture and the universities. So we have been very involved in the boycott activities against the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra, Habima, the National Theatre, Batsheva, the National Dance Company, all of whom have visited Britain and London in the last 12 months. In those we collaborate with other people. For example, in Batsheva, the lead was taken by the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, because that was where they had their first big show. But they then toured around the whole country. We collaborate also with the British organisation BIN, which stands for Boycott Israel Network, which is a separate group of Palestine Solidarity activists who do not, who concentrate entirely on BDS. So that now BRICUP has become, from starting off with a simple role as boycotting Israeli universities, we have broadened out to be a part of the Palestine Solidarity movement as a whole. We try to innovate continuously, to think of new things to do, and we believe ourselves to be entirely a part of the national boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. Thank you.
In particular, we've witnessed a striking shift from virtual silence and unspeakability on the academic boycott on Canadian campuses to the launching of a student-led multi-campus divestment campaign since 2009-2010, and the creation of a cross-campus national organizing faculty working since the formation of Faculty for Palestine in the spring of 2008. And I'm going to say more about what we do a little later. I'm just going to set some context, but I'll just say that we started in 2008 with 10 people. We now have 600 people on our network list, and we're on over 40 university campuses, about 10 of which are actually organizing quite heavily. So we have, in five years, we're just moving up to our 5th year, really expanded. But first I'm going to start with a brief history just to illustrate this dramatic change around academic boycott on Canadian campuses. In the summer of 2007, 23 Canadian presidents issued unilateral anti-boycott statements seeking to assert pressure on British academics to take a position against the British UCU's proposed academic boycott of Israel. And you heard me correctly. Canadian university presidents organizing to tell British faculty to reject the Palestinian call for academic boycott. So they're transnationally organizing up there in those ivory tower places. The president of the university where I worked at the time posted her official statement on the website stating, quote, "I urge our British university colleagues to reject the boycott proposal," unquote. So while explicitly aimed at the UCU boycott proposal, these presidential pronouncements were also a preemptive strike against any kind of campus debate, discussion, or activism around the academic boycott in Canada. This was very clear. The university presidents were intending to set a tone, to establish a climate of silencing, or establish and re-establish a climate of silencing on campus, locally, nationally, and globally, and to delegitimate open democratic debate and organizing in support of the academic boycott. This was made very clear in the right-wing press, Canadian press, which agreed with these university presidents, no surprise, that the proposed boycott, quote, "is not just a British university problem," unquote. So it's crucial to note then as well that these presidential statements were issued in the context of the new, fairly new, but very popular and fast-growing student-led annual Israeli Apartheid Week organizing, which had started 2 years before that at the University of Toronto in 2005. So they were responding to the success of the student organizing and the growth of BDS on our campuses. So that was 5 years ago, and this was the early phase of what we are now in Faculty for Palestine calling the silencing campaign on campus, in which the university presidents have taken up the cause of Israeli apartheid very explicitly, both individually and in coordination, to attempt to shut down campus BDS activism on Palestine. Just quickly to give you a flavor of what this silencing looks like, there's been the attempts to ban the words Israeli apartheid on our campuses. There's been a cancellation of room bookings and whole conferences, mostly organized by students. There's the banning of Israeli Apartheid Week posters in 2009 on 4 campuses. Annual attempts to ban Israeli Apartheid Week altogether. And this includes in our House of Parliament, which try and take motions to ban us, etc., and so on, blah, blah, blah. There was also in 2009 the formation of a pseudo-parliamentary commission, which was formed targeting campuses specifically, which their statement is that they wanted to, they said, quote, "The scourge of anti-Semitism is a growing act in Canada, especially on the campuses of our universities." And what their definition of anti-Semitism is like what Jonathan was talking about, and they were attempting to legalize the EUCC definition, in which any criticism of Israel is considered to be anti-Semitic. This silencing campaign was so intense in 2009 that the VNC issued a statement condemning, quote, "the repression in Canada against Palestine solidarity organizing." So in all cases, the actors motivating and implementing this silencing campaign are Canadian state officials from all major parties, numerous university administrations and presidents, and the pro-Israel lobbying and advocacy organizations such as the B'nai B'rith, the Canadian Jewish Congress, Hillel, Israel on Campus. So in 2007, as I was saying, the silencing campaign was actually successful amongst faculty. So there was virtually no organized opposition by faculty to the president's statement at the time. The only organized faculty voice was in fact 125 pro-Israeli faculty at U of T who published a letter in the mainstream press trying to condemn Israeli Apartheid Week. So in 2007, this convergence of anti-academic boycott by the presidents and anti-Israeli Apartheid Week consensus among pro-Israeli academics and university presidents prevailed. That was 5 years ago. And I think it's important to note that the Canadian, this anti-boycott campaign was further reinforced by the longer context of imperial wars, neoliberalizing of the campuses, and very intense anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian racism in Canada and on the campuses, definitely after 9/11. So all of this heightened the climate of fear, and it reinforced the extreme caution and silencing amongst faculty and academics, in particular those who were targeted. The anti-boycott position of the presidents was also able to prevail at the time because of a lack of an organized faculty space for discussion and action. There was none. So by 2005, however, the BDS call was a game changer. It put a new critical space out there, and we've been able to build effectively since then. So today, after 5 years of building faculty for Palestine, the silencing campaign on Canadian campuses is no longer met by a silent faculty body. Rather than being complicit in silence, we have joined the students' earlier efforts, particularly around Israeli Apartheid Week, etc., and are now our own force on campus and in collaboration with students and anyone else who wants to work. We do need to expand. So while the silencing campaign continues, and it does so now in a context where an organized faculty base now exists, primarily in the form of Faculty for Palestine, which has several hubs on many campuses, and will continue to grow. And now I think I'm looking at my sketchy notes, and I'm going to move over. Yes, you're there. So now I'm just going to make the final few minutes to explain what Faculty for Palestine actually does and how we organize, so you have a sense, kind of like what Jonathan did. There's some similarities, and then there's some differences. So I'm just going to make 3 broad points. First is, the first thing we did, which was a huge task, was to really create ourselves a formation and a launch of Faculty for Palestine. So I'll talk just briefly about that. Like I said, that was in 2008, and we really organized around this notion of breaking this silencing campaign through building BDS. That was at the core of what we were doing. So we started with 10 faculty members in Toronto, and we basically started building from there, not quite sure what we would find out. Our first campaign, and we are an activist group. We're not we're not an official group. We're not attached to any official body. We're an activist, self-organizing group, grassroots. The first thing that we did was launch a campaign, an open letter, asking faculty to sign on to support Israeli Apartheid Week, to support BDS, and to stop the repression on campus. Unsure about how many signatures we got, we actually ended up getting over 420. Half of those were gathered before the war crimes and the massacre in Gaza in 2008. The other half came in like 2 or 3 days after. It was something very extraordinary, and it actually has built ever since. We were really clear that what we wanted to do in terms of setting our foundations and launching was that we weren't just going to be addressing the campus repression outside of discussing BDS. BDS was one of our planks. So BDS and the academic boycott was a prime part of what we do. The other one is addressing and challenging the silencing campaign. And the other one is building education around right to education and under apartheid and occupation. So we have those 3 planks that we continue to work with. That first campaign, we focused on silencing in the context of BDS, but we didn't require people to sign on and say, I'm a part of the academic boycott, because that would not have built at the time, given the silencing. But we had it in our platform. So that's the first part of what we did. Okay, and now I'm going to quickly say the last 2 things. So this was the first part. In the next 2 years and ever since, we've basically been building the education, teaching about the academic boycott in many forums, conferences, we have statements, we've had petitions, we've had speakers like Omar Barghouti, we've had making transnational links when we go out to conferences with USACBI, with BRICUP, etc. and also helping to build each other's campaigns. So when students set their divestment campaign, we actually helped collect signatures for that, and we actually work on those strategizing. We were invited by the students to work on the different campuses on those campaigns, which has been really important for us. The third and final thing I'll say is that right now we're at a point, and it's taken this long, to take up the 2011 challenge by PACBI to get concrete, to basically start with getting our campaigns, an academic boycott campaign in action, and to pass decisions around that, as well as to start enforcing it. So one of the things, we did actually in 2009 pass one resolution at the Canadian Union of Public Employees, which has contract faculty, and it was a boycott, a BDS resolution around academic boycott. We haven't done anything with it yet, but it's there on the books, and we will continue to work with that. But just to end off, what we're doing right now is we are starting to address what's been going on for a long time, which is these same university presidents making business trips to Israel and building programs, exchanges, collaborations, etc., and trying to normalize these on our campuses. And fortuitously, just before I got here, this showed up in what's called University Affairs, which every faculty member in Canada gets. And what this is, it's an advertisement called Canada-Israel Science and Technology Innovation. Canada-Israel Silence for the World Supplement. And it's all about collaborations. This special supplement, to be published in both Canada and Israel, will promote science and technology innovation and the partnerships that are enabling both countries to benefit from the other's knowledges and resources. This is what's happening. This is what we're going to be combating. We've got a campaign in the works. We've already had our initial confrontation with a president, and we will be building from there, and I can talk more about the specifics of that, but thank you very much for all of you being here and for this great time.
Because this is an organizing panel, it's more than just us talking up here. So can you please, if you're interested in knowing more about the academic boycott or getting involved in the academic boycott, we really need your name on this list to be in touch with you from the Palestinian campaign, or put down where you are, and the various campaigns can also get in touch with you as well.
Yeah. Listen.
And take one of these.
And next will be Rabab.
Hi. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm associate professor of race and resistance studies, and
can't hear you very well.
Hello.
Use the mic.
Can you hear me? Can sit down. Okay. So I'm associate professor of race and resistance studies, and I'm also the senior scholar in Arab and Muslim Ethnicity and Diaspora Initiative. Big name because we want to account for diversity at San Francisco State University, which was the site in 1968 for the most successful student strike.
People are having trouble hearing.
You're not hearing. You still can't hear me?
No.
Hello. Oh. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, so I start, my time starts now. Okay. Okay, so I'm
cheating.
I'm in race and resistance studies and also in the College of Ethnic Studies. San Francisco State was the site in 1968 for the longest and successful student strike by students from Black Student Union, MECHA, RASA, etc., who wanted the studies to reflect their own experiences. So this is a very historic place. However, we're also a victim, the program I'm with, because we dared, the students actually, not even the faculty, students dared, the Jarrar of Palestine students, to bring Omar Barghouti to speak right after the attack on Gaza in 2009, and the title of his talk was BDS, a Human Rights Perspective. As a result, 2 searches for 2 faculty lines were cancelled by university president. The searches, the lines were then dried out, and now we actually don't have. So the whole program is just one person. We're fighting it, and we think we will be successful in the future. Now the president also retired, so we have a new president, and we're doing different things with him who did not go to Israel. So that's a different situation. Okay. I want to say that one of the things I was involved in back in the 80s with the Palestine Solidarity Committee, and we actually started in 1985, inspired by the Center Against Apartheid and the Council for Namibia at the United Nations, which had a lot of staff of Palestinians and other Arabs and other people of color who were very active, to do something around Israel and South Africa. And it was actually our comrades from South Africa who were extremely principled, who supported us doing this, and they did not listen to the attacks from Zionists saying that this will undermine the anti-apartheid movement. So we did something called Israel and South Africa, the apartheid connection, with a question mark. And as one of the casualties was Professor Fred Dubé, who was on the National Executive Council of the American African National Congress, who lost his job. He was fired by Governor Cuomo of New York because he gave a lecture on Zionism. So this, I mean, there is a lot of histories, and I think it's really important to kind of think about that. In 2002, 2003, the students started after the re-invasion of Israeli forces of areas in the West Bank and Gaza that were controlled by the Palestinian Authority. Students started doing all these active petitions and so on in faculty, and as a result, 200 university presidents of United States signed a statement against academic boycott, very clearly posted ads everywhere and so on. Also, the American Association of University Presidents refused to actually host a discussion on the question of academic boycott. All of this is available. I'm saying this because there is a lot of background to this. So then, this is the history of the USACBI, U.S. Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel. We actually started around the Gaza invasion, 2008. We started with the California Scholars for Academic Freedom, condemning the attack on universities in Gaza in particular. They were being attacked at that time, and we were targeted by the Zionist academics and so on. And then we asked people to boycott. We said, okay, it's not enough to just condemn, and it's not enough to say we are extending our support to our colleagues. We really have to boycott, because Israel will only listen if it is being punished, because it's not listening to all the appeals to humanity and so on. So obviously they are doing whatever they want. So we really need to do that. So the USACBI, U.S. Academic and Cultural Boycott, was born. Now we are almost close to 1,000 faculty members at university campuses in the United States who are signing it. Okay, and this is really big. The American Association of University Presidents today is revisiting the question of boycott, and is actually put a call for papers for this journal, asking people to contribute arguments. Why is it that the academic boycott makes sense? So the stuff that they were not agreeing to before, now they are talking about. Okay, so this is some of the stuff that is going on, and I want to mention a few other of the achievements that we actually, before the achievement, let me talk a little bit about the attacks. As a result of all this, we have a lot of attacks on individual professors. And I think some people may know the case of Nadeau at Barnard College, who almost was denied tenure because of one graduate of Barnard College saying that she wrote books about Palestine and so on. It didn't succeed. Joseph Mas'ad, etc., etc. But I think the most serious attacks that have been going on, and I would say basically a couple of things. One, which intersects with what you guys were saying, is the whole question of equating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. And this is something that goes back way. It's not just in the academic sphere, it's everywhere, trying to muddy the waters about what is Israel, what is Zionism, what is Judaism, and what is the Jewish community. And Palestinians have been very clear from the start of Palestinian resistance to say we are clearly anti-Zionist. And this is why any kind of sheltering of Zionism basically makes it possible to kind of muddy the waters and mix it. And actually, if you want to get down to it, it's anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic to say everybody is the same, this whole one homogeneous community, because that's not the case. But and I don't want to elaborate on that because I'm going to use that. Okay. So, but this is one of the things, and one of the most recent things that have happened is that there have been ads in the New York Times targeting specifically professors and activists who talk about this. Also, we have in the California State Assembly, we had a non-binding resolution passed that it's called HR 35 that basically equates Zionism and anti-Semitism and critique of Israel, and basically all intended to silence. There was the University of California, and I will talk about this is because University of California, Berkeley, and I see Ibrahim Shakati, who was one of the student activists at the time, passed a resolution, the student body passed a resolution to divest, and 2 days later, a couple of student leaders on the leadership committee were bribed with fellowships and so on, so they changed their vote. And as a result of that, now there was a report that was issued by some people in the University of California system saying that Jewish students are experiencing a climate of fear on campuses. I mean, regardless whether it is, the question is regardless whether it's true or it's not true, and we will say it's not true. Okay, it's not true because of the whole hegemonic narrative, and everything is supportive of Zionism and Israel. And those particular Jewish students who are pro-Israel, because there is also a whole lot of anti-Zionist Jewish students who are in the boycott campaign, in the campaigns to criticize Israel, so they don't agree with that. But it's the perception of this to kind of like put it forward that makes it impossible, that makes it harder for people who are speaking about justice for and in Palestine. And I don't want to say pro-Palestine because it's not pro-anything in Palestine. It's pro-justice in and for Palestine. Okay? Makes it harder because if you stifle the voices and you don't let people speak out, that's what Mary Jo was talking about, then we don't have any debate. We actually are not encouraging critical inquiry. We're not talking about it. People don't know what's going on, so they're only going to be receiving their information from mainstream media, with i.e. hegemonic media, and so on. That basically tells one side of the story, which is the Zionist and aggressive and colonialist side. The same way it does it about the United States, about any other country. It's not, there is no exceptionalism about Palestine in this sense. It's just like anything else. So this is very much happening right now, and we are actually trying to organize around it. The other aspect of it is that AIPAC, the pro-Israeli lobby in Washington, has been specifically targeting students of color, black students, leaders, and so on, to take them to trips to Israel, trying to brand Israel. This is the whole part of the Brand Israel campaign. Some people talk about pinkwashing. There is a whole bunch of ways in which people have to talk. This is one of it, is to say this is, and this is about the whole scientific thing. But I mean, if you talk about scientific advances, for what? To what end? And this brings up the whole question of why do you produce knowledge? Do you produce knowledge for knowledge's sake? I mean, why do we produce it? Some people used to argue knowledge should be functional. But functional for what? It could be functional for the extermination of people, and knowledge could be for justice. Okay, I'll come to that in a minute by giving you some examples of what has been some of the achievements that have happened, and then I'm okay. Okay, so some of the achievements that have been going, that we've been accomplishing, is that most recently, actually, University of Southern California has a UNESCO chair, and the UNESCO chair wanted to honor 5 individuals worldwide for their human rights achievements, for their achievements for humanities, and so on. Except one of the honorees was Shimon Peres, the president of Israel. Oh, criminal. Okay, I think in the past, this may have happened or it may have been hushed down. But this year, 4 of the honorees, everyone except for Shimon Peres, every single one withdrew and refused to participate. And this was because of the efforts of activists on the ground in Connecticut who actually pulled their resources, and every single person withdrew because they did not want to participate in injustices. Amherst College, which was the first college in the United States to divest from South Africa, was also the first college to demand the divestment from Israel. Okay, and I want to kind of say, like, so we would avoid the technicalities and so on, that when we talk about divestment and sanction and boycott and so on, it doesn't mean that everybody is actually going to withdraw all their money from South Africa. It doesn't mean that we'll actually succeed in all of this stuff. It just means that it becomes really intolerable for Israel, exactly like South Africa, to pursue its policies. So it is not necessarily, okay, how much money, how many dollars we were able to divest and so on. It's just making it really difficult, making it really costly for Israel to maintain what it's doing. The MECHA, which is the National Organization of Chicano Students, Mexican Americans in the United States, passed a resolution not only in support of Palestinian students, but also in support of boycott. UC Irvine, University of California, Irvine, which is the same campus at which 11 students were sanctioned for shutting up Michael Orenz, the war criminal, who wears now a suit instead of the military uniform, and speaks as a civilized and civilian person on university campus. They just basically spoke up and said, you are a war criminal, and walked out. They didn't, you know. Anyway, the students were sanctioned and they were punished. Now UC Irvine is actually passing a resolution for divestment. And I mentioned the UC Berkeley that already, I mean, and the thing is that yes, UC Berkeley ended up reversing the decision. But the fact that the discussion has happened has educated so many people, because I remember one night, and I wasn't there for all the nights, until 6 in the morning, faculty, students, staff, community were all gathered in the Martin Luther King Auditorium until 6 in the morning, and student after student, community member, people were standing behind the microphone testifying to what was going on in Palestine. And this in itself was a teaching, was a way in which to educate the population about what was going on. So that in itself, even though the outcome was not necessarily a successful outcome, in itself was a very important and successful campaign. And I think this is how we can measure what we are doing and so on, not necessarily quantifying it, but in qualitative terms and in cumulative qualitative terms. The most recently, the American Studies Association, we had just had the meeting last week in Puerto Rico. We have a resolution to be passed by the association. It's going to be discussed by the membership and so on, and we're actually intending for it to be so. And when it passes, because I think it will pass, but even if it doesn't, there will be a massive educational campaign. But if it passes, American Studies Association will be the first professional association in the United States to pass a resolution boycotting Israel. This is really important because the other association, the Middle East Studies Association, is going to be a very long time. Middle East Studies Association, by the way, in 2003, also wrote a letter condemning AUT for daring to discuss, not to vote, not to even support boycott, to discuss boycott. So an academic association was criticizing another group of educators for engaging in what educators are supposed to be doing, critical inquiry and having discussions for the sake of educating themselves and their publics. I mean, this is, it's ridiculous. It's kind of like, you know, but they thought that this was the right thing to do because we are supposed to be disinterested. And, you know, we know that when you are disinterested, you're basically supporting the status quo. I mean, when you don't do anything, that's what you keep things the way they are. Okay, so another thing that I think is really, really important is the delegations that a lot of people have been organizing. We had a delegation June 2011. There are some people who are here. Angela Davis was one of the people. She will be speaking tomorrow at 2 panels, at the gender panel and as well as the queer panel at 12 and at 2. And she has been writing about this a lot. And the delegation, there was another delegation in January that have been mostly constructed from indigenous scholars and scholars of color and marginalized communities. Why is that? The United States is a settler colony. People really need to there is no American exceptionalism. United States is not some unique country, a nation of immigrants. It is built on the land of indigenous people, exactly like Israel is. It's very similar to that. And in that sense, we cannot just, as organizers, we cannot just organize only for Palestine. We cannot just say, okay, people just good and well American, we can educate them, you can be really nice and so on, and have charity and pity on the Palestinians and feel really good about it. No, there is a question of comfort, there is a question of cost. It does cost people to be involved in something of this, to take a principled stand. But also, we need to also be undermining and criticizing the very system that we are living in. Because if we let it go, it means we're actually only talking about some opportunistic ways to raising support for Palestine, but not actually thinking about the context that we are in. So if we are thinking of a framework of the indivisibility of justice, which is inspired by Martin Luther King talking about saying an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, it's the same thing. If we are talking about that, then we cannot be supporting justice for in Palestine and actually saying that the United States is only a nation of immigrants. We all come from different places except for the people who are there, right? I mean, it's very interesting discourse. Right? So, and what's really interesting for the second delegation in January, there was a special issue of social text that has just come out. Yeah. And another thing that really happened with the delegation is that one of the members of our delegation, the president of her university, was going on a trip to Israel. And she not only signed a statement against that, but she also urged other colleagues to do so. So we're seeing kind of like more and more like sort of expansion. There is deepening of knowledge, but there is also expansion, like horizontal sort of like expansion of the information about this. And okay, so I want to just like say a couple of things because I have 5 minutes left. I'm going to finish before the 5 minutes. So I mentioned the whole question about why is it really important to think about what sort of knowledge we need to produce, and to emphasize the question of critical inquiry, the question of producing knowledge for justice, and specifically to be able to really have the debate on campus and not to succumb to the question of silencing. I think what we really need to do is to start thinking about shifting the academic paradigm. Because we're talking about discussion, dialogue not in the sense of two symmetrical sides, because there is no symmetry, but to kind of shift the academic dialogue away, the paradigm, away from thinking about kind of like, okay, so we need to have two sides and so on in debates, but to actually really start talking much more, and we are, some of us, but not, I don't think, everybody who's in the movement is doing it, that there is something wrong here. That I do agree with Jonathan that I think that if you people want to engage with particular scholars and so on, it's okay, there is no problem about the boycott. They're not violating the boycott. But I would want to know which scholars we're talking about. Because if the scholars are participating in manufacturing death, there's something wrong about that. And I think we really need to kind of like also escalate this kind of discussion and say there is something wrong. We need to like put this, because again, the whole question of kind of like thinking about that neutrality is complicity. And people at the end of the day, they do choose. They need to choose. They need to be faced with the consequences and say, which side are you on? Are you going to be on the side of justice? Are you going to be on the side of the future? Or are you going to be on the side of oppression? Thank you.
Hello. Cool. Well, firstly, thanks for allowing me the opportunity to come and speak about the South African experience of academic boycott. I'm going to speak mostly from a student's perspective. I am here representing students, and in South Africa, the movement, the academic boycott movement has been, students have been at the forefront of that. So I'll speak about what's been happening in terms of students. Before I go into exactly the campaigns that we've been doing and where we're going to from here, I want to note that there's been a lot of similarities in terms of challenges faced by people who are running campaigns for the academic boycott of Israel. I mean, across, and it's faced everywhere in activism and solidarity, Palestinian solidarity. It's the standard things. It's anti-Semitism, well, calling us anti-Semitic. It's bribery, offering trips to Israel, and it's saying that Israeli institutions, the Israeli Academy is exceptional and has things that we need, so we can't possibly boycott that. And going the legal route, saying that academic boycotts are illegal and so on. So I mean, the challenges are standard across. Seems like it is across all the countries we come from, and probably ones that aren't represented here today. So yeah, that's not really something that needs to be talked about. Those challenges are going to be faced, and from our side, I think we just face them as they come, and well, pretty much ignore most of them because they're not worthy of anything substantial to say about them. So what's been happening in South Africa? About 2 years ago, I think it is now, 2 years ago, wasn't too long. The University of Johannesburg was the first institution in South Africa to cut ties with Ben Gurion University in Israel. That was a big campaign from students and lecturers, and then at the institution, and then across to other institutions too. So many people signed on to the call that UJ should cut their ties with Ben Gurion University. And that ended up happening, and it was, I think, a big victory. It was the first time in South Africa that any institution had cut ties with Israeli institutions, but also the first time really that academic boycotts got into public discourse. It was widely covered by media, and that's when the debate around the academic boycott of Israel started in South Africa. Following that, South African Students' Congress and other broad-based student movements started to adopt boycott, divestment sanctions, and started to actively support Palestinian freedom and the academic boycott of Israel. So that was the next important step. After that, the university I come from, Wits University, this year, just a few months ago, the Student Representative Council adopted a full cultural and academic boycott of Israel. Again, just widening the debate, the public discourse around the academic boycott. That was a very successful sort of step. It was also widely covered in the media, and what we found is a lot of people want to know more. A lot of people are joining the Palestine Solidarity Committee and so on, wanting to know about campaigns that are happening even outside of the academic boycott campaign, but in terms of consumer boycotts and so on. So it's in a sense swelling the ranks of solidarity in South Africa. Following the WITS Student Representative Council boycott was Rhodes University. Students at Rhodes University then sent a memorandum to the Senate of their university asking for an institutional cutting of all institutional ties, and again a full academic and cultural boycott of Israeli institutions. And then just last week, so it's all happening pretty soon, and there seems to be some sort of snowball effect. Just last week, the South African Union of Students, which is a collaboration of all representative councils from universities across the country, signed to support BDS and IAW, Israeli Apartheid Week, on our campuses. So that's another big step. So what we have is really a growing student movement and a growing mass student movement on our campuses. If you think about all the large student movements, South African Students' Congress, South African Union of Students, and so on, all adopting BDS, what we're coming up to is a lot of students involved in Palestinian solidarity and academic boycotts on our campus. It's becoming very, very unfashionable, or what we hope will happen is that it becomes very unfashionable for an institution to have ties with an Israeli institution, or for students to even fathom the idea of having ties with an Israeli institution. So that's becoming very unfashionable on our campuses. And at the same time, whilst it is led by students, it's also becoming very unfashionable for academics to want to collaborate with Israeli academics or Israeli institutions. So there's a sort of sensitivity that's growing around it, a sensitivity around who you're collaborating with, and is this in line with the principles of social justice. And this is something that's really coming out of the academic boycott, and largely due to what happened at UJ, the first campus to cut ties about 2 years ago. So it's that sort of discourse that's growing. Also, in terms of campaigns on our campuses resulting out of the academic boycott, but not necessarily confined to academic boycott, so cultural boycotts. When Brand Israel so following what happened at UJ, Brand Israel sent a delegation of young Israeli students and so on to our campuses to sort of convince us that Israel is great, and essentially, in a nutshell. And this was not taken kindly to at most of our universities. There were protests at every university that they tried to go to. Other universities explicitly rejected them even entering their campuses. So that was a complete failure. And it's that sort of cultural boycott that's also having an effect on our campuses. And then the other big one is Israeli Apartheid Week. It's growing. It's growing on our campuses, and again, the mass movement is going to lend a lot of support to Israeli Apartheid Week. We have a lot of people involved, a lot of different organizations involved, and really broadening what IAW is on our campuses. A few years ago, like let's say 2-3 years ago, it wasn't such a big thing. There were a number of events on campuses, but not widely attended, that kind of thing. This year, and probably the coming year too, it's going really big. We're having collaborations across campuses, lots of students attending things. So yeah, again, students are really at the forefront of this and pushing their own academics in institutions to cut ties and so on. So where to from here? I think it's about, like I said, the snowball effect. It's about carrying on what's been happening and taking it to other campuses, such that everyone knows about it on all campuses. We don't have a lot of universities in South Africa. There's about 15 maximum, and I could even be exaggerating there. So we take it to every campus, and you create a sort of network of solidarity among students, and then academics also. There are a lot of academics that join us in a lot of our campaigns. So it's not, I'm not going to say it's very difficult to do that. I think in the next few years you are going to see that happening, a wide support network, solidarity network across South African campuses. That's the first one. And then I've talked about sensitivity around academic collaboration. And yeah, just broadening the debate in our campuses. So the concrete steps that have been taken, the boycotts at universities, are really lending that support to broadening the debate in our campuses. People want to talk, people want to discuss, people want to know how they can get involved. And yeah, I guess we are going to see what happens and create that mass movement of solidarity that is very much needed.
Can you hear me there? Is this on? No. Is it on? Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. I hope you can hear me. Maybe I can use that. Okay, maybe I can use this. Okay, it might be losing battery. So thanks everybody for being here, and yeah, thanks for having us as well on this panel. Again, my name is Yafa, and I'm an organizer with Students Against Israeli Apartheid in Canada. But I am Palestinian, so I only moved to Canada not that many years ago. So I was involved in the student movement in Palestine before I moved into Canada, and then now, obviously, I am involved in the student organizing and solidarity activism, Palestine solidarity activism in Canada. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about that aspect. I did go to a number of different universities. But I do want to say one thing first. When we talk about student activism and student and Palestine solidarity activism outside of Palestine, internationally, I think it's very important for us to first remember that Palestinian students inside Palestine have always been in the forefront of the struggle, as well as women, etc. So they were very vital and are still very vital to our struggle and our movement. And they always have been, especially in the 80s and continuing to today. So this is something to keep in mind. And as a Palestinian student also coming to do Palestine solidarity work outside of my home, I did face quite a few challenges, or looked at things a little bit differently, because the challenges that we had to face or have to face in Palestine as student organizers are completely on a different level than the challenges that we face as Palestine solidarity activists outside of Palestine, or especially Canada, now being one of the worst countries in terms of its unwavering support of Israel. So again, Palestine solidarity activism on Canadian campuses, I can only speak, is not a new thing, obviously, but what's new about it is that it kind of shifted after the 2005 call for boycott, divestments, and sanctions that came from Palestinian civil society in Palestine. And how it shifted is that, again, the term apartheid became more utilized, and the work that we do, because now we echo the call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, became more campaign-oriented, action-oriented, as opposed to just having panels and talking about our struggle and what happens in Palestine without offering concrete campaigns or ways to get involved from outside to do something about it. Because always people say, oh, this is too bad, this is terrible, what can we do about it? And now that we have BDS as students and as students activists, it has been an amazing tool for us to offer this next necessary step in order to utilize our efforts internationally. So I also recognize this role, organizing outside of Palestine. That it's a little bit of a different role, but it's also very important for Palestinians who are outside of Palestine to be leading this activism and these kinds of campaigns as well. So as BDS activism kind of intensifies on campuses, same did as MJ and others have spoken about, the backlash and the silencing efforts from administrations of Canadian universities. I can only speak, well, I will be speaking specifically about Carleton University in Ottawa, the university where I did my grad school. So there are many different levels, and the one thing that Carleton did, Students Against Israeli Apartheid did back in 2009, is we launched a divestment campaign, and Canada's first divestment campaign. So basically, just in brief description, what this divestment campaign means, divestment itself as word is kind of the opposite of investment, but not really. So basically, it's asking you to pull your investments from certain companies that do business with Israel, etc., and then you can maybe invest them in different alternative companies. But maybe we can get into that on Saturday. So basically what we called for as student activists, we carried a research project in our university in specific in regards to the pension fund of the university. So each university has a big list of companies that make up the pension fund. So we got also, with the support of faculty, to get a list of those companies. We did research and we picked kind of 4 main companies at the time that were involved in, they're not Israeli companies, they're British and American companies who produce weapons. And these weapons are used by Israel and have been used in the last Gaza attack and the very current one. So basically, we picked these main companies, and I'm speaking specifically about weapon companies and also non-weapon companies: Northrop Grumman, Tesco Supermarkets, BAE Systems, Motorola, and L3 Communications. And we created this report that was based on a lot of research. A lot of people were involved in this report, mainly students, but also faculty members and some academics and community members. And we basically demanded from the university, after we did the research and proved how these companies violate international law and human rights, demanded the university that they immediately take the stocks, that they immediately divest. It's more specific, we demanded the Board of Governors of the university via the Pension Fund Committee to immediately divest from these companies. And second, to refrain from investing in similar companies. And third, to adopt a socially responsible investment policy for their pension plans so this doesn't happen in the future. So this is in a nutshell our divestment campaign. And what have been the backlashes of this divestment campaign? And again, it's been really hard to kind of, also being Palestinian activist, and it took me a while actually to learn what kind of backlashes we get, because for me in the beginning it was I didn't feel that I needed to justify why this is a human rights violation, or why is being involved as an academic institution that's supposed to foster academia and safety and goodness and ethics and good research. Why is it so challenging to justify why it's wrong for an academic institution to be invested in weapon company or in weapon companies? Why is that wrong? Having to justify that to academics that teach there, faculty members who we're supposed to feel safe around in academic institutions. But what we don't think about is that Palestinian students inside Palestine don't feel safe in their academic institutions, not because they don't have the right to speak on certain topics and issues of violations of human rights, but because Israel denies them their basic right of being involved in academic institutions and in student movements, etc. So I found that kind of really hard to work with, but now that I'm learning more, it's becoming more challenging, not easier. So yes, we did face a lot of backlash. The university in the beginning completely ignored the report. We launched the report in January of 2009. They completely ignored it. And then we got to a point where we didn't give them a choice to ignore it. So we forced them to not ignore it. And the way we did that was, first of all, it's a lot of work. Launching something like this around BDS is a lot of work. So you first have to do the research, but then you have to really do the legwork, and that's the harder part, is really building public solidarity amongst the student body, the faculty, labor unions on campus, as well as staff. Money and influence and power, and usually, mostly, are not progressive and don't have progressive politics. And those very people who now try to shut us down, I wouldn't be surprised if we do a little bit of research. During South African apartheid on campuses, they played the very same role. So, but they don't dare to say it now. But we know who they are, and I think we should keep that on record. So this is basically what has been happening. One just last thing I would like to mention in terms of the latest university attempt to silence us, not just in regards to our divestment campaign, but as SAIA, as Students Against Israeli Apartheid, again, trying to ban the word apartheid, canceling our room bookings, that's all fine. But recently, our university, Carleton University, last year, they started this commission. It was called something really strange, like the Interracial, Interreligious, Intercultural Commission. And basically, we didn't know what was the point of this commission, but we later find out, and people who sat on the commission were handpicked. You couldn't actually ask to sit on the commission. They were handpicked. And the findings of this commission, they came out with a report very recently. And this report basically is very poorly, I mean, the methodology of the report is insulting to academic integrity to start with. It's an 11-page, really poorly written report. But basically, what they came up with over this year, a bunch of academics and representatives from students, is this really poorly written academic report that basically it intends to explicitly and implicitly silence any criticism of Israel on campus, which means I could be penalized for even saying that Israel violates human rights and international law, full stop. I would be called anti-Semitic. And they use Jewish students on campus and their experiences without even actually researching the experiences of all Jewish students. So they treated all of them as monolithic and having the same experience and feeling and etc. And they said that they feel unsafe on campus because of the pro-Palestine trolls who are us. So, yeah, so they come up with this report basically saying, oh, they feel unsafe, we have to make them feel safe. So how do we make them feel safe is to criminalize anybody who criticizes the state of Israel. It doesn't make any sense. And we just recently, so Faculty for Palestine actually launched an open letter basically condemning this and asking and demanding the university to withdraw this report and to withdraw it. And actually 8 former commissioners who were on the commission withdrew or tried to withdraw from the commission and signed this open letter. And over 800 signatures on this letter were gathered in very few days from students from Carleton across Canada and internationally, as well as faculty members and academics, condemning this report and condemning the methodology of it, but also the implications, the very dangerous implications of this report on us students, activists, and Palestinians also. And many of the organizers that we have are Palestinians, people of color, women, students who don't have status. They are on student visas. So in many cases, our status in Canada has been threatened. They say, do you want this scholarship to stay? If you want this scholarship to stay and remain, you gotta shut up. You can't do this anymore. So that happens, and this is just one way of doing it. So I'm just gonna wrap up now, and I'm just gonna end it by saying that we will continue to build our campaigns on campus and in the community. We're not gonna stop. If they want us to stop, we're not going to stop. The only way we will stop is actually when Israel respects international law, when justice is there, etc., etc., and when the apartheid policies are over, when the refugees are granted the right of return, and that might be a long process. So until then, we will not be silenced. We will not stop, and we will not be silenced.
Thank you, Yafa, for ending on a beautiful note. Just before I start to take a few of your questions, I wanted to say there's another panel on the academic boycott that will happen on Saturday from 10 to 12. But we're doing that one as an open discussion so we could sit and strategize around how to build the academic boycott campaigns in the various locations, especially here on this continent, because we still don't have very big academic boycott campaigns here. So you will have seen a paper like this go around. I see a lot of Palestinians nodding their heads, which means I expect you to be helping us to distribute it. I'll talk to you later, Aya. Please do take it, and it's from 10 to 12, and I hope to see many of you there for an open strategy discussion. I'll take questions from the floor. We'll take 3 questions at a time. If you can please stand up, identify your name, and if you're with any organization, and let us know your question. I know there's a tendency in these kinds of forums for people to want to make comments. Feel free to, but please keep them to a time limit. I will give everyone the exact same time, but I'll start going like this if you go over. And I'm a pretty loud Palestinian woman, so don't let me talk over you, and please wrap it up if I do this. So I'll take the first set of 3 questions. But now that I said that, don't be scared to ask. Please ask. All right, I have 1 hand, 2, and I'll try for gender parity, by the way. 3 men have put up their hands, so 3. Aya, all right, go ahead.
My name is Husseini. I'm from South Africa.
You have to take a microphone.
I think everyone can hear.
No,
My name is Husseini. Can I have the... My name is Husseini. I am a lecturer at Al Mustafa University in South Africa. Just my question was that is there any statistic of the database of the universities which already have cut their relationship with the Apartheid government or universities? And if it's not there, I think we have to start having such a database. And also, how we can appreciate those universities who are taking the initiative and do the job. Like, for example, in the case of the sister mentioning about UJ University, Professor Farid Isaac and his colleagues and the people in university who has done a great job of starting this and having this blow at the face of universities of occupied regime. If, I don't know, by BDS or any other body, we can have a letter of appreciation to the University of Johannesburg and to any other institution who is going to take this initiative, I think it's going to be very helpful. Sorry, thanks.
Thank you. Next one, a hand, and yes.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes. My name is Gianluca. I am a journalist student here from Brazil. And before I go to my question, you said something about not having enough support or a very incipient support here in this comment. I assume you were speaking about Latin America?
Yes.
So,
on the academic boycott, not on everything.
Yes, I know. But just before I go to my question, I would just like to make a very clear note that we Latin Americans have, and it has everything to do with the Palestinian cause. Do not refer to Latin America as a continent, and please do not refer to America as a country, because America is one continent, and it goes from Canada to Argentina. And I think it has everything to do with the Palestinian cause. And my question is, what we do see in many situations is that universities, they are all attended by some sort of intellectual elite in any country. It doesn't matter where you go. How do you see, or if at all, what do you see the effects outside the university community of your activities? Do you understand it? If you have at all seen any implications, any consequences, positive outcomes of your actions inside universities in the outside community?
Yes. Actually, I just have a question. I'm just here to introduce myself and Rafeef. Actually, we are a group of, I'm from Gaza. My name is Aya. Actually, my voice is
it's okay.
So yes, I can speak.
Use the microphone.
Okay. So my name is Aya. I am a BDS activist and a one democratic state supporter. I am from Gaza. I came along with other four youth of my age, around my age, and also we have five activists, young activists from the West Bank, and 5 activists also from inside Israel. So, and also I will talk here. I will talk about the BDS in our workshop. So after this, I can distribute some of the leaflets from here. I just wanted to highlight 2 points here about the South African, work on the academic boycott. And actually, we work with this university. We are students in PACBI, Palestinian Student Campaign for the Academic Boycott of Israel. So from Gaza, we worked. It was established after 2008, 2009, the massacre on Gaza, 2008, 2009. We established it with just 4 students, along with our professor. Maybe some of you heard about him, Hadari, and then the number is increasing. So with BIT University, we work with them on this resolution, and I myself I translated it into Arabic, and I do remember when we heard that yes, now BIT University after Johannesburg University now they took them. So my point is here is to highlight the importance of every of the workshop of the academic purpose. And the second thing, now I graduated from Al-Aqsa University, and now I teach in the Islamic University. When in 2008, 2009, both Islamic and Al-Aqsa University, they were targeted, and most of the campuses were completely destroyed. So now, when I asked for a leave in order to come here, the dean asked me that, okay, I want to give you a video in order to show it to the public after what happened to the Islamic University. Because some people are saying that, okay, but don't mix politics with academia, don't mix politics with culture. But actually, I came here directly after the latest attack, so I couldn't see him in order to take this video. My point is that we are living and we don't know what will happen. Before I came here, I didn't know that I will be able, me and my colleagues will be able to come. So yes, I finished. I finished.
So Aya will be there on Saturday, and hopefully by then we might have the video as well. We'll see.
Yes.
Okay. There was another hand, I think, in the front. Yes. Can people who use the microphone pass it to the next person, please?
I'm Berit from the Palestine Committee of Norway. And in Norway, in my organization, the academic cultural boycott is a very important task. But in Norway, we have a separate organization working with this issue. PACBI. Do you know PACBI in Norway? No. And I have a question for you, the panel, because I think that the academic cultural boycott is the most important campaign compared with all others, because this the campaign represents high educated people, and you are a threat for the Israeli. And my question is, you said it yourself, that the academic cultural boycott is a silent boycott. But why is it so? Is it because of the media? Or is it something about you? Why don't you shout louder?
Thank you. I'll bring it back to the panel, and then we'll take one more set of questions. I think we'll have time. Who would like to go first in answering any of the questions?
Just quickly, I think I'll cover a couple of questions. The one about, does the academic boycott have an effect on the outside, as well as the statement just here. So it's very difficult, but one of the things is, I think all aspects of the boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign are equally important. And one of the difficulties about the academic boycott is kind of what I described in my talk. It's just been that much more difficult to put on the table. That if there's any clarification needed by that in terms of in the university, that's actually, I think, the thing. And I agree with you. We do need to keep shouting louder. There's no doubt about that. And I do want to talk to you afterwards to get you on my list to see what's happening in Norway things. But just one thing, one of the things that we did, and it is difficult actually sometimes to actually make the connection across the campus and across the university to outside the university, partly because yes, it is an elite institution. And that is true. But what BDS and the academic boycott has done is actually to break down a lot of that, right? So there is also an inverse thing that's going on. And it's not just an elite institution. A lot of people there are actually not in the same place. I'm going to speak from personally. I've been a contract faculty member for 8 years. I'm now leaving the institution. I'm on employment insurance, right? And I'm one of about 40% of faculty. A lot of students are struggling. So we have to sort of not just focus on that elite part, but we also have to address it, which I think is very important, because it's not about being educated. I think that there's many forms of education and many educated people in the BDS movement. It's one of the smartest movements in terms of being able to make connections, to make the links, to make the ties with PACBI, and I think we need to keep doing that. One of the things that we do in Faculty for Palestine to ensure that we're always trying, at least, and trying to build those connections, is we started by becoming a member, a committee of the Coalition Against Israeli Apartheid, which represents all of the BDS sectors. And I think that was our only starting point. It connected us to BDS, it connected us to all the local movements. We work across all of those movements, including labor, including queer activism, including student activism, and I think that needs to be built. It's like building from whenever the local and national and central organizing that cuts across all of the BDS sectors is what's going to help make it more relevant coming out of the academic, because it is true, it is a bit of a task, there is a disconnect. Sorry.
A couple of points. I don't think anyone in the academic boycott would say it was the most important boycott. But it is an important boycott, and it is an area to which society is very sensitive. So that for example, there are wonderful boycott activities going along in Britain about Veolia, G4S, Mexico before it was forced into bankruptcy, and so on. But they don't generally get to be on the front page. And there's something about the academic and the cultural boycott to which society responds. So, since we are not going to bring down Israel by these boycotts, let me be clear, we are not going to bring Israel to its knees by an academic boycott, or indeed any of the others. What we are going to do is to make Israel a pariah state. What we are going to do is to make Israel a state with which the financial institutions of the world do not wish to do business, to make it into a state which our governments will not wish to do business with. And we are in the process of changing the minds of the civil society about what it is willing to put up with from its governments. Now, the academic and cultural boycotts are uniquely positioned to do that. And so there is a sensitivity there which I think is very important. Perhaps how do you do that?
I just wanted to respond to one of the first questions about a database of universities. On the Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott Initiative, we try to put up anything that happens around the academic boycott up there. And certainly when the Johannesburg victory happened, we were in constant communication and we sent the letters of support and we were there hand in hand with everyone, shoulder to shoulder with everyone who was participating. But definitely, if you go to the PACBI website, it has the listing of all the cultural boycott initiatives and letters, as well as the academic.
And actually, some of us hear about this in other places. That's how we know what's going on. We hear from them first, and then we contact other people. And sometimes people make it directly. I just wanted to add to the whole question about university being elite and so on. I agree, so I don't want to repeat what you're saying. But I don't think, and I want to add that I don't think a project of this sort, academic boycott in general, I don't think, by the way, that it is the most important. I don't think it's the most important. I think they're all the same, and I don't want to rank what's more important or less important and so on. It depends which location you're at. For each context, there is context-specific ways of dealing with things. So it sometimes shifts. Sometimes you are like sometimes you're a teacher, but on another part you may be kind of talking about divestment from pension funds or something. So at that point you become a union member. So it's I don't want to kind of like I don't want to put it in boxes. But in the work that we're doing, we are part of a community. We happen to be, some of us happen to be at the university during the day teaching. In the afternoon, we will be to other events in the community happening elsewhere and organizing around other kinds of. So I kind of like think, especially when you talk about community colleges and public universities and so on, it's that's one thing. But the other thing I think didn't get your name. I'm sorry. Danuka. I think the question of it is the idea of thinking about the university as an elite, as opposed to movements outside of the university that maybe not being elite and so on. And I think it may have. I'm not sure if this is what you're saying, but I'm going to take advantage of what you said to just make a point about the whole question of how sometimes intellectual thought is thought of, like people who are in the business of producing knowledge, and I'm not meaning business in a neoliberal way, are seen as sometimes that kind of like they're the ones who own knowledge, as opposed to people who are outside of the formal knowledge production. I mean, we're in Brazil, we're in Paulo Freire's lands. I mean, so I think the kind of work that we do, all of us, falls within that there is all sorts of ways for people to acquire knowledge, learn, teach, produce, reproduce, contest, construct new knowledges and so on, and that comes from all sorts of places, and it's not about formal education per se. And if we're actually only talking about formal education, we would be missing the boat, because we are talking about we're part of a political movement to change. Right. And so what we do outside of Palestine, I think, you know, Yafa really made like the whole question of what's happening in Palestine, what's happening outside of Palestine. Our success and our inspiration has a lot to do with what happens in Palestine. We respond and we express our solidarity with the people who are struggling on the ground. We are struggling, and I think that it's important what we are doing. But at the end of the day, if you have a PhD, you will never starve. I mean, we always will find something to do. So I think it's not the most important thing to happen to us, right? Okay. So I think, it's relative. You know, some people think it's really, like, we'll eat, we'll find something to eat. Right? So I think it is the liberation movement that is fighting on the ground that basically really inspires and encourages the people who are outside expressing support, even those of us who kind of go back and forth and so on. That's how it works. So it's really, we're part of like an international community that works in different things, and we complement and we complete each other.
I'll be short. I want to respond to the question on actions inside the university and how they affect the outside. Panelists have been talking about the elitism of universities. And I think it's not so much elitism in a knowledge production sense, although it is that. That's not what I want to talk to. What I want to talk about is more that universities are supposed to reflect a better version of society, in my opinion at least. I think because of the types of debates and discourses and knowledge productions that happen on university campuses, there's supposed to be a way of finding a better model of society within institutions. And I think it's because of that the academic boycott is important. So whilst everyone else can be fine with the injustices that are happening in the world, universities have to take a stance and say no. And I think that's where it comes from. That's why universities and academic boycott is important in sort of directing public discourse outside of the university. And then in terms of academic boycotts being silent, I don't think they are. I think they're symbolic, not silent. And I think when an individual academic decides not to have any ties with an Israeli institution, I think, yes, that's an individual silent thing, but I think it has a ripple effect through any institution. And yeah, that symbolic value is very important.
We'll do the next round, and we have Mick, and back there, and all the way at the back here. Mick.
Thank you. Can I just ask the panel a very simple question? There's been some discussion on elitism, but I just want to ask, would they agree that it's really, really important in order to be effective with the boycott, that we pull down the walls and the barriers that kind of unconsciously arise? I think the best way to pay tribute to people one really esteems is to be critical. And I think about the example of the head of the Israeli Medical Association, who became head of the World Medical Association. And some brilliant doctors did some excellent work and collected, I think, 700 signatures against his moving into that position. And afterwards, when I spoke to some of the people involved in it, I said, "You're absolutely crazy. Why the devil didn't you ask all the Palestinian activists around the world? We've all got a doctor. We all have a doctor, and I have 6 in my local practice. And if doctors had thought about not just speaking to other bloody doctors, but had thought about everybody who's got a doctor, the 700 could have been a multiple of that. Very, very easily indeed. And I think the sort of default arrangement of doctors speaking unto doctors has to end. And I think it has to end even more radically. A few years ago, went onto Glasgow University campus with a wallpaper table, and we set up a petition to get Mordecai Vanunu nominated as rector of Glasgow University. Winnie Mandela had been elected rector decades earlier, and the whole idea was to point to Israeli cruelty, the Palestinian prisoners as well, and I promised Vanunu he wouldn't win, but he actually did win. Nobody on campus asked, who the devil invited you onto this campus? In months of campaigning, and also we ran John Pilger as rector at Edinburgh University, we got 1,400 votes there. Nobody once said, you're not a member of this campus community. It was as simple as falling off a log to go onto the campus. There were no town and gown issues, if you like. So I would like to ask the panel, do they think that we need to break down the barriers that exist between town and gown? They don't exist as much as you think, between doctors and non-doctors, and say we are part of a campaign looking for the best way to punish Israel, and that means that we have to collaborate without distinction.
I wanted to quickly share two. I'm Soraya Jawuddin. I'm a South African labour activist. I wanted to share 2 quick experiences that took place at universities in our country, and why the issue of an academic and cultural boycott is so important for oppressed people when they want to isolate the oppressor. The one was in the 80s, at the height of quite organized resistance internally and externally by people and our liberation movement externally against the apartheid government. And we had to make a decision that we wanted the South African apartheid state isolated. And an Irish academic, political scientist, Conor Cruz O'Brien, decided to come to the University of Cape Town and give a lecture. And the students had approached the Vice Chancellor and said, the African National Congress has asked that the apartheid state be isolated, and we don't want Conor Cruz O'Brien to speak on this campus. And the academics and the Vice Chancellor said, that's nonsense. Intellectual work is neutral. It's got nothing to do with the anti-apartheid struggle. So Conor Cruz O'Brien is going to speak, because it's a violation of what the universities represent if we send him back home. The students and workers organized and physically smashed the meeting down. 3 students got expelled. My brother was one of them. He was a SANSCO national organizer, and he was expelled, much to my parents' horror. And yeah, now that incident has been written about and has been discussed in academia of both South Africa and internationally, and was a very big thing. So it made newspaper headlines about the hooligans in South Africa that had no respect for an Irish professor. But it allowed space to say, for the ANC to say, but we've asked for an academic boycott. He had no business going to that university in the first place. The second example was post-1994, when the Secretary of State of the United States, Colin Powell, was going to visit South Africa. and he decided he was going to give a lecture at the University of Witwatersrand, where Tasneem and Tokelo come from. And students and workers that come from the union that I am representing blocked the gates, and Colin Powell was not represented by, his security wasn't organized by our country, it was organized by the United States military and intelligence. And we blocked, and he couldn't enter the campus. And his lecture was delayed by more than an hour. Of course, the workers and students were beaten up by the security, but he didn't get to make the lecture without that incident. And it allowed space, so everyone condemned the hooliganism of the workers from our union and the students, but it allowed us space to say that he represents agents of imperialism and oppression. So I'm just sharing those two examples, I'm not concluding on anything, because I don't think we must be too negative about the irrelevance of an academic boycott. It creates space to explain why in any society the dominant ideas in any institution are the dominant ideas of that society. So that's what academia would represent in an oppressive society. Thanks.
With all respect to the panelists, Jonathan, I'm not sure if the BDS campaign in general and the academic boycott in particular serves to make Israel into a pariah state. Israel does that by itself. The BDS campaign and the academic boycott may expose Israel's pariah status, but it doesn't. But it doesn't make this pariah. It doesn't make Israel into a pariah state. The other thing is that I think that the academic boycott of Israel, the one that has been called by Palestinians, unlike the boycott against apartheid South Africa, which was called by the ANC, is a very light boycott. I mean, remember the ANC's boycott was also banning individuals from coming to South Africa. You had to be vetted in order to come to South Africa. And on that note, I just want to share a story from South Africa. You know, the funny thing with Rafeef is that we have so many victories coming out. I mean, not only in South Africa, but across the world. It's difficult to keep track. But 3 months ago, 4 months ago, at the South African Sociological Association, the most prestigious sociological gathering in South Africa, there was a panel that had an Israeli academic from Arial, the settlement.
Settlement, right.
And he was sharing the stage with South African academics, and one of the South African academics asked him to distance himself from the occupation before he can partake, before the South African academic can partake in the panel. The Israeli academic refused to do so. The South African academic withdrew himself from the panel, so did the rest of the panelists, and the entire hall, the entire venue left in protest against this Israeli academic being.
Hello, I guess this is the last question for tonight, right? My name is Anthony. I work at the American University of Beirut, and I'm here with Queer Visions for anti-pinkwashing organizing. So I have a specific question about something that I thought came up even today in our own meetings, and it has to do with American organizing against for BDS, against Israeli, so on. And I can see how that necessitates turning a critical inward eye on settler colonialism in the United States of America. And my question, I guess, is how do you then negotiate the amount of energy, the priority, the importance of exploring this critical eye on settler colonialism and the immediate urgency of solidarity with the Palestinian cause?
Thank you all for the great questions. I just want to make a few announcements and then give it back to the entire panel to just do final remarks. How many people know where the demonstration is at 5? How many? Okay. How many people are going to the demonstration at 5? All right. So, it's at 5 o'clock, and we really need to represent. Bring t-shirts, flags, banners. delegation will be marching close from here, and the Palestinian delegation will be joining them. I can't actually pronounce where the march is starting from, but it's at 5, and it's in your program.
It's in the program.
We don't know what it is. You can't say it.
The public market.
Public market.
Public market.
Public market. Oh. 5 o'clock, public market. Please come out. Please bring your voices. We need to be loud to let everyone know that we're actually here. Again, I'll remind you that there is an academic boycott discussion that will happen on Saturday, so please do come. And tomorrow there's also a panel on combating brand Israel's sporting boycott, the sports boycott in comparison to South Africa's apartheid, and that's happening from 10 to 12. So please do check that out in your program and come out for that one as well. And see you at the demonstration. That's the note I will end on, and I'll give it to the panel.
I'm going to give this to Rabab after, but I do want to comment on that question really quickly in regards to how to balance, you know, speaking about colonialism when we organize in America and in Canada. I'm speaking about Canada in specific. Yeah, and I think it's a very important question. And as a Palestinian who moved to organize as a Palestine solidarity activist in another country that is a colonial country, except the difference between Canada, where I'm organizing right now, and Palestine is that the colonial project in Canada has been extremely successful. It has been extremely successful to the point where you can live your whole life in Canada not knowing anything about the indigenous people there. Right. So I feel it would be very hypocritical for us as Palestine solidarity activists who call Israel an apartheid state, because it is, and work on boycott, divestment, and sanctions until this apartheid state is not an apartheid state anymore. It would be very hypocritical of us to do that on colonized land without standing in solidarity, and actual meaningful solidarity, not just acknowledging that we're standing on colonized land, but actually being completely in solidarity with the indigenous population there. It's like, imagine someone from another country organizing in Palestine about Peru, let's say, without ever be standing in solidarity with the Palestinians in Palestine and doing that in Palestine. So for us Palestinians and Palestinian activists, the aspect of solidarity, not just with indigenous people, but with other oppressed people, is very vital and important to our work.
50 people.
Yeah, I actually want to speak about the light issue, the hooligans. Okay, because I think first the hooligans. I think it's very similar to the UC Irvine. It's exactly what happened to your brother. So I think there is also a lot of ways for us to draw connections and think about that and inspire each other. I think that and I think we a lot of the times, I don't want to say we, but I think there are some academics who are very concerned about being called uncivilized. This is kind of like, this is not the thing becoming. This is not civil behavior. This is not. When you're in a revolutionary mode, when you're really trying to change the world, you're not supposed to be in civilized mode. I mean, that's very problematic. We, people who are leading revolutions do not take showers sometimes. I'm not saying everybody should take a shower if they're not leading revolutions, because sometimes there is also that other effect that happens, which is problematic. But that's another discussion. So I think that, you know, that we need to kind of be thinking about these things, these traps that get set up for us. And sometimes we incorporate them because we want to seem that we are like approachable, we're reasonable, and so on and so forth. Which leads me to the second point about the whole question of kind of like light boycott. And I have two things. It has to do, I think, with the specificity of Palestine. It has to do with the fact that historically the Zionist movement has succeeded in lumping the tragedy of the Holocaust with the foundation of Israel. And I kind of like, I'll say it now, I keep saying that it's like, look, Israel was not set up by the survivors of the Holocaust. Israel was set up by Zionist Eastern European Jews that used the survivors of the Holocaust, because European countries closed the doors. United States closed the door, so use them as fodder. And actually, there have been protests by survivors of the Holocaust inside Israel Israel because they weren't getting benefits, they weren't being cared for, they were homeless, and so on and so forth. So I think we really need to kind of like, you know, I used to always quote Edward Said when he used to say we are the victims of the victims, and I stopped doing that because we're not the victims of the victims. I mean, yes, Palestinian people have been victimized, and the Jewish European people have been victimized, but it's not that relationship, it's not direct, and it's not, you know, like that. It's not. And I think it's really important for us to know the history. And I think when we don't know it, we kind of like commit these mistakes a lot. But the question of light, I think that we had the problem when we had actually a dilemma when we went at the delegation June 2011, because we had very short time. And some people were saying we should go through Tel Aviv airport. And we had a big discussion. We agreed that we're not going to go through Tel Aviv. We're going to go through the same routes that Palestinians go through. If you are coming to express solidarity with the Palestinian people, you can't be going through the routes that their colonizers go through. I mean, it's just, it doesn't make sense. And it's something that will last for a long time. But I understand where the whole discussion comes in. And maybe on Saturday we can talk more about like the boycott, divestment, and sanction. In terms of just the priorities, I agree with what you said, Yafa. And I don't think it is about either or. It's not about, it's a framework. It's really having a very critical framework against colonialism. And I always think about it like, if I'm not going to speak about settler colonialism in the Americas, by the way, when I talk about, not talking about just North America, because there is settler colonialism in these areas too, right? I mean, in Brazil and everywhere else, we have that. A lot of indigenous populations have been completely wiped out, and some are still there, still struggling. I always think about what will happen if somebody goes to Palestine and talks about Israel being a nation of immigrants. How would Palestinians feel? I mean, just flip it around and think about that, and you see how problematic it is in all settler colonies. And I think it's a framework. It's not, and it gets actually reproduced worse even in American university institutions across the board because they become satellite colonies, right?
Okay, just quickly, yeah, in terms of your question, my answer is yes, we do need to break down those barriers. One of the things that we're doing in Faculty for Palestine is we are explicitly an activist organizing. There are very, very few on campus in terms of faculty activism, and it gets into the point Rabab said about not being civilized, etc. To be an activist is to go there, and that's what we actually want to do. We want to have an activist faculty campus, and in whatever small way that we can push that, that is actually what we're doing, and I think that's one thing. The other thing is in terms of breaking down those barriers, the campus, non-campus doctors, not just speaking to doctors, I like that phrase, by the way, Israel actually gives us these opportunities. There's an organization that I just want to quickly mention, or a new group called New Yorkers Against Cornell Technion Partnership, which are basically the Technion gave money to New York City, to New York City to build a humongous campus and do all this science building, etc. Total collaboration project. And a number of people from New York, from all different, not just academics, from all different places, including workers on campus, but also residents in the area, are building this amazing campaign. And it's very new, but it's called NYACT, N-Y-A-C-T, and it's something to watch out for. So we need to just grasp these opportunities. And these are the spaces, whether they start on campus or outside of campus, so they need to continually build. And just, I mean, I'm just going to say on the question of settler colonialism, absolutely, I just agree with what was just said by Rabab and Yafa. But I also just want to say that in the Canadian context, BDS has in fact opened up a lot of anti-racist debate. Like if we think about BDS as an anti-racist and anti-colonial campaign, we are actually seeing white Canada and the way in which Canada's sort of white foundations and its colonial foundations are being exposed. There's been like a whole new literature on Canada's long history of supporting Israel. Sometimes those connections are made to racism, sometimes not, and we need to make those links clear to say, well, what does that say that Canada has this long-standing relationship? It means that Canada has long-standing racial and colonial foundations, and make the links that way. And that's actually one of the things that we do try to do. We've written on it, but we always need to do it better. It's not something you say once and then it goes away. You need to keep organizing, keep building that in, that message. And that is something that BDS has given to the world, is opening up that argument of racism and colonialism again.
I want to join in this general discussion. But first, to respond to a remark by Mohammed, where I said that our job is to make Israel a pariah state, and he said, no, Israel does that itself. Well, it gives us all the evidence, but it doesn't make it a pariah state unless we find the way of informing people effectively about what Israel is doing. So we have to make it into a pariah state. They have made it potentially a pariah state. I want to go into this question about this very light, which it is, a light boycott which has been called for by PACBI. Does this mean that PACBI is a sellout, asking only for a lightweight academic boycott and cultural boycott compared with a much stronger one in South Africa? And the answer, I would say, is no. PACBI had its very good reasons for doing that, and they're to do with the extent of friendship and goodwill which Israel had compared with South Africa at the time when the boycott was announced. The Holocaust, even though the people in Israel, the Zionists, were not Holocaust survivors, the Holocaust is a very effective rhetorical gambit. We can't ignore that fact that many people who are not as informed as those in this room will find that as a reason not to wish to join in too rigorously anti-Israel activities. Israel, unlike South Africa, as I've said, has friends all around the world. So the decision as to how to call this boycott was a political one, and we need to be political too. We need to have our own political analysis. We need to understand it in terms of colonialism. We have to have our critique of Zionism, etc. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to shove that into everybody's faces all the time. We need to understand what we're doing and how we're campaigning. But we have to look at, in terms of what we do, in terms of the people we're trying to influence. The people we're trying to influence do not have our analysis at this moment. We need to give them things which they will not reject. We need to accept, in general, the guidelines which PACBI has given us, which are quite sensible, and then vary them, either personally or in terms of local circumstances. For example, it only asks us to boycott Israeli institutions. That's no reason why individuals of us cannot boycott individual. I personally am not going to have any dealings with that Israeli academic in my field, which goes beyond the guidelines. In other cases, we may wish to go not so far as the guidelines. For example, when we were boycotting Habima in the Israel National Theatre, which came to England this year, the suggestion from PACBI was that we should boycott the whole globe-to-globe festival involving 37 different performances by national theatres, and we said no, because we will not get a single theatrical person in Britain to support them. So we varied the advice from PACBI and got a very successful campaign with high-level theatrical people from Emma Thompson up and down to support the boycott which we actually advocated for, that one company only. So we have to be political in what we do, political in terms of what we think the people that we are trying to get to in this particular campaign will stand at the moment.
I'll be short so that we can go to the march. Just quickly, historically, South Africa during the apartheid times called for boycott of the South African state, and in doing this, the first, prior to even a formal boycott request coming out of the African National Congress, the people who were at the front of leading a boycott against apartheid South African state were students and academics in universities. And I think this is as far as the role that they play goes, is that it's again, I'm going to repeat it again, it's in shaping that public discourse. And those academics and students who started to isolate the apartheid South African state did it in such a way that they sensitized the rest of the public around what South Africa was doing back then. In terms of collaboration though, I think absolutely. There's no doubt that we should all be collaborating. What I like about South Africa is that at the moment, in terms of solidarity and BDS, is that you have trade unions, you have students, you have ordinary citizens, and political parties and all of these different groups who come together under one banner, very often with the same message. And I think that's what's needed. You need everyone to come together, stand in solidarity with one united message.